Dio, Chesbro, Conway, Cook, Davis, Dickinson, Donnelly, Ing, Fior, Fletcher, Fong, Fuentes, Furutani, Gaines, Galgiani, Garrick, Gatto, Gordon, Gorell, Grove, Hagman, Halderman, Hall, Harkey, Hayashi, Hernandez, Hill, Huber, Weso, Huffman, Jeffries, Jones, Knight, Lara, Logue, Lowenthal, Ma, Mansour, Mendoza, Miller, Mitchell, Monning, Morrell, Nistande, Nilsson, Norby, Olson, Pan, Perea, V. Manuel Perez, Portantino, Silva, Skinner, Smythe, Solorio, Swanson, Torres, Valadeo, Wagner, Wykowski, Williams, Yamada, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, members, a quorum is present. We ask our guests and visitors in the rear of the chamber and in the gallery to please stand for the prayer. We ask our Assembly Chaplain, Father Constantine Papadimos, to offer the day's prayer.
Good morning. Let us pray. Lord, you don't judge us based on our physical conditions. You look at our heart. You look at the gifts you have placed inside of us, and you respond to our faith in you. When at times we may think that you bless everyone else but us, remind us to honor you and to do what is right. Then surely blessings will follow us every day of our life. Amen.
We ask our guests and visitors to remain standing and join us for the flag salute. Please join Assemblymember Logue as he leads us in the pledge. Assemblymember Logue.
Thank you. Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, visible, liberty, and justice for all.
You may be seated. Reading of the previous day's journal.
Assembly Chamber, Sacramento, Monday, February 21st, 2012. The Assembly met at 12 noon. Honorable Fiona Moss, Speaker Pro Tem of the Assembly, Presiding Chief Clerk E. Dawson Wilson at the desk. Reading Clerk Timothy Moore. Then reading the roll was called to Shaw, Alejo, Allen, Amiano, Atkins, Bell, Berry Hill, Block, Bloomfield, Bonilla, Bradford, Brownlee, Buchanan, Butler, Calderon, Campos, Carter, Conway, Cook, Dickinson, Donnelly, Ing, Fior, Fong, Fuentes, Furutani, Gaines, Gatto, Gordon, Hagman,
Mr. Calderon moves and Ms. Conway seconds that the reading of the previous day's journal be dispensed with. Presentations of petitions, there are none. Introduction and reference of bills will be deferred. Reports of committees will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Messages from the governor, there are none. Messages from the Senate, there are none. Motions and resolutions. The absences for the day will be deemed read and printed in the Journal. Mr. Calderon, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 45.5 to allow Assembly Members Atkins and Carter to have guests and photographers on the floor.
Without objection.
Also, I request unanimous consent to suspend Rule 118 to allow Assembly Member Mitchell to have a guest at her desk and a photographer on the floor.
Without objection.
Also, I request unanimous consent to suspend the rules to allow Assembly Members Bromley, Gaines, Ma, Pan, and Williams to speak on Adjourn in Memory.
Without objection.
That's it. One more.
Mr. Calderon.
Also, pursuant to Rule 96, request unanimous consent to refer bills, the following bill from the Appropriations Committee to the Rules Committee, SB 754.
Okay, is there a second? Mr. Allen seconds. This motion is not debatable and may not be amended. Takes a majority of those present and voting to Okay, there's no objection, so okay, unanimous consent was granted. Motion carries. Okay, we have some guests here today with us in the chamber. Ms. Atkins.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker and members. It is my real privilege to welcome Rear Admiral Dixon Smith, Commander of Navy Regional Southwest, to our chambers. Rear Admiral Smith assumed command of our Navy Region Southwest on December 9, 2011. The Navy Region Southwest includes 9 major installations in California. Rear Admiral Smith also serves as Regional Environmental Coordinator for the Department of Defense for U.S. EPA Region 9. Joining him today from Navy Region Southwest are Lieutenant Joshua Rojas, Chris Stathos, the Fleet Environmental Officer, Mary Kay Farron, the Department of Defense Regional Environmental Counsel, and Randy Friedman, California Governmental Affairs. So I'd like the members to please join me in welcoming our esteemed guests to the California State Assembly.
Mr. Huffman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to acknowledge and welcome former Assembly Member Joe Nation, who has brought with him some bright young students from Stanford University.
And Ms. Carter.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Please join me in welcoming guests from the Kingdom of Jordan who are spending 2 weeks with the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, which is SMUD. The visitors are from the Electricity Distribution Company, which is one of the 3 Jordanian electric utilities. The executives are learning how to improve system planning, operation, reduce power losses, as well as improve management practices. The visit is being coordinated by the nonprofit U.S. Energy Association and by the U.S. Agency for International Development. With us today is Bilal Jaradat, who is the Manager of Technical Auditing and Safety Department Management Representative, Abdulmunde Alamari, who is an engineer, and Mohammed Malkawi, Head of HR Planning and Development. John DiStasio, General Manager and CEO of SMUD. Terry Bernard, Supervisor Learning and Engagement from SMUD. And Paul Coxum, Supervisor Training and Support and Grid Assets from SMUD. Please join me and welcome our guest.
Okay, members, we've got 3 bills on the daily file. So if members could please return to their seats, and we're going to start. Business on the daily file, second reading. There is no second reading. We're going to go to items on concurrence.
Right behind the standing in the back.
Concurrence item. Item 1, AB 324. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 324 by Assemblymember Buchanan, an act relating to juveniles and declaring an urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Ms. Buchanan.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. AB 324 will clarify in statute what has been the practice for the last 5 years. Juvenile offenders who have been convicted of certain sex offenses are eligible for commitment to the State Division of Juvenile Facilities. The purpose of AB 324 is both to clarify the law and to ensure that commitment to DJF remains an option for juveniles adjudicated for sex offenses under Penal Code Section 290.008B going forward. Because this has been the practice since 2007, the cost to house and treat juvenile sex offenders is already built into the state budget. With regard to the current population of juvenile sex offenders, no new state costs are anticipated. This bill is necessary because many counties are unable to provide appropriate treatment or housing for juvenile sex offenders, and it is important to have other options available for those offenders who do not respond to county-level interventions or who need specialized treatment.
Members.
Thank you. AB 324 is supported by the California State Association of Counties, the Police Officers Research Association of California, and numerous county probation departments. AB 324 has not received any no votes. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 66, noes 2 on the urgency. Ayes 66, noes 2 on the measure. Measure passes. File items 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 pass and retain. File item 7, Senate third reading on the amendments, SB 730. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 730 with amendments by Assemblymember Hagman, set 1.
Mr. Fuentes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm presenting on the bill, is that right?
These are on the amendments.
I don't have amendments. Mr. Hagman has amendments.
Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I rise to present amendments to Senate Bill 730. Members, it's highly unusual for me to be standing here offering amendments to a claims bill. These are usually non-controversial bills for payments owed by the state. But this bill is anything of the sort. It includes a $6 million payment for general fund to pay a settlement in the case of Environmental Protection Information Center versus California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. My amendments would strike the bill from the $6 million payment to settle this claim. I believe the amendment should be adopted, this payment stricken from the bill for several reasons. For starters, I believe that we are setting a very precedent with the payment of this settlement. This is not an example of routine case where the state lost some wrongdoing. Rather, the case is an example of outside groups suing the state in an attempt to shut down California timber industry and then profit from the lawsuit. As a result, the shakedown lawsuits were potentially shutting down an industry that employs thousands and thousands of Californians, boosts local economics in parts of their state, and generates significant tax revenue. But the lawyers who file these cases are now trying to get a payday from the taxpayers of California. When the state settles these cases, the attorneys go back before the court and seek attorney fees. In this case, it's the $3.5 million plus interest. We very well could see them use this payday to go back and file more lawsuits against the state. I don't believe taxpayers should be on the hook to pay for these shakedown lawsuits, period. I'm asking for your aye and vote amendments.
Mr. Calderon.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I move to lay these amendments on the table.
Okay, is there a second? Mr. Gatto. This motion is not debatable and may not be amended. It takes a majority of those present in voting to adopt Mr. Calderon's motion to lay the amendments on the table. Clerk will open the roll. All those vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Calderon's asking for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman's asking for a no vote. It's a majority of those present in voting. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 49, noes 19. Motion carries. The amendments are laid on the table. Ms. Harkey?
I rise. Could I also have an amendment to the same bill to offer?
Clerk will read the second set of amendments.
Senate Bill 730 with amendments by Assemblymember Harkey, set 2.
Ms. Harkey.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I rise to present amendments to Senate Bill 730. My amendments to this bill are very simple and straightforward. As a matter of state policy, going forward, not with this, but going forward, the amount of interest paid to claimants for unpaid legal settlements should be the same as the interest we pay to our taxpayers to refund overpaid taxes and fees that they pay to the state. This would be the bond equivalent of the 13-week Treasury bills established at the first auction, either in January or July, depending on what month the claim is made. One of the claims in SB 730, as you've heard, involves a state settlement in the case of Environmental Protection Information Center versus California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. Thank you, Madam Speaker. According to the terms of the settlement, the daily interest for the unpaid claim in this case is 7%. In other words, the state owes the attorneys for EPIC $1,150 per day for every day we haven't paid the claim since the day of settlement, November 15, 2011. So if we waited a full year to settle this claim, the interest cost alone would be $420,000, and that would be a lot more than what we would be paying under the amendment that I am offering. I believe this is irresponsible, especially in the case when we have core priorities such as education, public safety on the budget chopping block. I cannot, in good conscience, justify giving the green light to future exorbitant interest payments like these. This is a lot of money, and it's coming out of our pockets to settle claims. The claims may, in fact, need to be settled, but I don't think we should be paying them a 7% interest rate in these times. On claims going forward. I think the T-bill auction would be sufficient. And just because you sue the state and win doesn't mean you should get better interest rate on delayed payments than the taxpayers. So passing these amendments will put an end to the situation going forward and restore a sense of fairness to taxpayers and how judgments against the state are paid. I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Calderon.
Yes. Madam Speaker, I move to lay these amendments on the table.
Is there a second? Mr. Gatto? This motion is not debatable, may not be amended. It takes a majority of those present in voting to adopt Mr. Calderon's motion. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Calderon asked for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman asked for a no vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 49, noes 22. The motion carries. Okay, we're going to now read. Clerk, file item 7, SB 730 on the bill. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 730 by Senator Kehoe, an act relating to payment of claims against the state, making an appropriation therefore, and declaring the urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Mr. Fuentes.
Members, this bill is one of two annual claims bills carried by the Appropriation Committee chairs to provide appropriation authority for legal settlements approved by the Attorney General and the Department of Finance. These settlements were entered into lawfully by the state upon advice of the Attorney General's office. They are binding state obligations regardless of whether we agree or disagree with the merits of a particular case. In each case, per settlement terms, if the legislature fails to appropriate funds necessary to cover the settlement, the obligation remains enforceable by the court, and in most cases, additional interest will accrue and or additional litigation may be pursued. This bill, which has an urgency measure, requires a 2/3 vote on the floor, passed the Senate 32-5. It is an administration-sponsored bill supported by the Department of Justice and the Department of Finance. The bill appropriates $13 million to the Department of Justice to pay for settlements in 6 cases, including estimated interest. Any funds appropriated in excess of the amount required for the payment of these claims reverts to the appropriate fund. There is some urgency regarding the interest on one of the claims, the Headwaters case, which has been costing the state about $1,100 per day since November 15th of 2011, about $100,000 to date. Additional delay would only result in hundreds of thousands of dollars in additional interest. On behalf of the administration, the Attorney General, and the Department of Finance, I request your aye vote to follow the law and pay our bills.
Mr. Wagner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I must rise in opposition to this bill. There is one claim in particular in here that is objectionable, but let me just talk briefly about the entire process. What we are seeing here is a situation where lawyers are making out at taxpayer expense when they find a judge who is sympathetic to their cause, rather than go to trial, rather than have a judgment in many cases. What we end up having is a cozy little settlement that the taxpayers pay. I would argue that we should not dip back into the general fund. If there is a division, if there is a department, if there is an entity for this state that is causing the state liability, let's take the settlement, let's take a judgment, let's take attorney's fees out of the appropriations for that division, that department, whatever it might happen to be, rather than coming back here and asking for a whole new, rather large pot of money. The second problem I have with this, frankly, has to do with the interest rate that is being paid. We just defeated a motion, but I want you to know what that motion did is it said The lawyers should not get more interest on settlements than our taxpayers, than your constituents get if they've overpaid their taxes. When we refund them, we are not paying them the same rate. In fact, I think right now we may be paying them nothing. And yet we're giving an interest windfall to lawyers. I'm glad I voted as I did for that motion, because I'm not going to have to go back to my constituents and explain why I'm paying lawyers more interest than I'm paying you, that the state is paying you, the taxpayer. Let's say no to this. Let's send it back. Let's have it reconfigured. Let's have it renegotiated. Let's have a reasonable interest rate paid. And then let's also look about paying our taxpayers a fair return when they've overpaid their taxes.
Mr. Norby.
I rise in opposition too, Madam Speaker. Anytime that I'm told we have to do this, there's no choice, the Attorney General is making us do it. I think back the first time I ever taught government, and you should think back the first time you ever learned American government. Separation of powers. It goes back to the French Enlightenment. Each branch of government has different powers. Ours is the sole power of the purse. And so to say that the courts, judicial branch, the executive branch can force us to spend money, well, if they can force us to do it, why is it up for a vote? They can't force us to do it. We have a role in this process. We're not potted plants, and we should be part of that role rather than just say the Attorney General is making us do it, and if we don't, then the courts are making us do it. We are one of the three branches of government which is part of the checks and balance, which is not simply a rubber stamp. And to go back to the original amendment, which was so casually dismissed, which might have swayed my vote on this a little bit. Again, why are we paying plaintiffs' attorneys that are suing the state 7% interest when we're paying taxpayers when we refund their money late? What is it, like 2.5%? I'm not sure. I know it's tied to T-bills, but it's about 5% less than we're paying the attorneys. We need to deal with that first before we say, well, look, they're making $1,100 a month in interest because we're paying them the 7%. Well, let's change that, and we can change that prospectively to make it the same as what we're refunding taxpayers. I believe the settlement is exorbitant, and I believe that we should be a part of this negotiating process to approve something that's reasonable rather than just be dictated to by another branch of government.
Mr. Calderon?
Yes, Madam Speaker and members, this case gets worse from here, not better. The money the state's going to have to pay will be more, not less. That's why this is a settlement. Now, I agree. I don't agree if you get the right judge, and maybe that helps you get some kind of advantage. And I mean, I tend to agree with that, but the reality is most of the judges out there were appointed by Republicans. We've only had one governor 4 years, and you've had Republican governors for 8 years. The argument is, that's a specious argument. Lawyers are negotiating this. We may not agree, or we can disagree, but the reality is that they wouldn't be settling this case if the state didn't have substantial risk. And in terms of interest paid to the public versus interest paid on a settlement, fine, bring that bill. Bring that bill, but not here. This is a totally different process. And it's going to save the state money. I ask for an aye vote.
Mr. Nielsen?
Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the State Assembly, it is time to take a stand and say no to these incessant, interminable, extraordinarily costly lawsuits. Oh, will it cost us more? So we have a gun at our heads. What I'd argue even a useless or at least unfair interest rate on top of that. It goes on and on and on. I may remind you of these massive billion-dollar lawsuits that are accrued against the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation that are draining our treasury. because of the obstinacy of that department, in part. And what we have here is a classic example of one particular little cabal, a group with their attorneys, ripping off the taxpayers of California, long-term lawsuits. Republican judges, Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, do I need to say more, ladies and gentlemen, the most reverse court in America is the author of an awful lot of this tragedy that has come to visit upon our state taxpayers. Nay, today is the time to say no. And in one piece of this insidious payoff, that's what I'm calling it, this group is only invited to file more lawsuits because we, the deepest pocket of all, the taxpayers of California, will recompense you. Ladies and gentlemen, I generally do vote for these things, but this is a time to draw a line in the sand and just say no.
Ms. Olson?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in protest to the interest rate on this settlement. Why would we pay the maximum rate of 7% interest on any settlement right now while we have a $9.2 billion deficit, and while the Wall Street Journal reports that for the first time in history, the Treasury is actually considering offering negative interest rate Treasury bonds, negative. So the average interest rate today is probably like 1%, but we're offering 7% while we have billions of dollars in deficit. It's incredibly irresponsible. And I don't know why every single one of us in this room would be concerned about that and be dedicated to fixing that just as soon as it's possible, because that 7% that we're paying on top of the settlement could be used to fund our schools, to fund our sheriffs, to fund all the other programs that we make very difficult and painful decisions on in this body. So, you know, Senator Calderon, in respect, Assemblyman Don Wagner, I believe, is introducing a bill to fix this in the future. And my understanding is that bill has been run several times in this assembly before, has never passed, but I think it's very important that we all think very seriously about fixing this for the future so that in future settlements that come before us, we aren't paying 7%, but that at a minimum, we're at least just paying according to what the average interest rate in the United States is today. Thank you. And I urge your support of the future bill to fix this problem.
Mr. Allen?
Fellow members, just 2 points. I would point out that on the issue of the settlements, do we really want to start injecting ourselves into the settlement negotiations of other branches of government? Do we have the time, energy, expertise to do that? Number two, I just point out to my colleagues that the whole subject of the interest rates is governed by statute. Are we really going to go do something that is retroactive in nature? If we want to do something prospectively in the future on the interest issue, then we should do so by a bill and discuss it. But to do it retroactively, I do not think would pass muster. So I do urge an aye vote on the bill. Thank you.
Ms. Harkey?
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. My amendments were prospective, and so I'm glad there's agreement to do something going forward. I wish the amendments would not just have been killed because they were presented by a Republican. I think that's pretty shameful. We can change statute, and we, as Mr. Norby says, are not potted plants. We are paying 7% on this, and granted, we will have to pay 7% on this. But we could have accepted amendments so that we wouldn't have to get into this next time we're stuck with another languishing payment of a settlement. I don't agree with the settlement. That's neither here nor there. My amendments were prospective to reduce the interest from 7% down to the T-bill rate. And so I would like very much to see cooperation on that. Maybe, since my amendments were nuked with no consideration simply because they were presented by me, I would hope that I could work with Mr. Calderon or somebody else on the other side of the aisle to have an urgency bill come forward and perhaps to get this taken care of, because we will be having more of these claims and we will be settling quite a bit more. And it's it's really ridiculous for us to be paying 7% interest right now. I know a lot of our people would like to be paid 7% interest on the taxes that they're trying to get back from the state when they overpaid. And a lot of your people would like to be paying 7% interest on their CDs and other things. This is a lawsuit. This is a settlement, and we should not be paying 7% interest. So thank you very much.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Fuentes, you may close.
Members, paying court settlements is about the rule of law. The law provides for the award of attorney fees to the prevailing party in suits of this kind. We should be congratulating the Attorney General's deputies who demonstrated their responsibility to the taxpayers by resolving the attorney fee claim for this slightly more than a third of the original demand. These claims and settlement bills are moved only upon the counsel and support of the Attorney General, the Department of Finance. The legislature has long accepted its responsibility to follow the law and pay its bills, regardless of the party of the current Attorney General or Governor. I ask for your aye vote to continue following the rule of law.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 54, noes 15 on the urgency. Ayes 54, noes 15 on the measure. Measure passes. File item 8, SCR 62. Clerk will read.
Senate concurrent resolution 62 by Senator Steinberg relative to Spay Neuter Awareness Month.
Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I rise today to present SCR 62 on behalf of the Pro Tem, which declares this coming Tuesday, February 28th, as Spay Day USA 2012. World Spay Day was founded by the Doris Day Animal League in 1995, and it is the first and only international day promoting spaying or neutering of pets. And why is this important? Well, I'll tell you. Around nearly 900,000 dogs and cats entered animal shelters in 2010. And unfortunately, roughly 175,000 dogs and 250,000 cats were euthanized in California alone that same year. Spaying or neutering can not only reduce the number of animals that end up in our shelters, but also decreases the likelihood of cancers and other problems so that they can live healthier, longer lives. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Okay, seeing no further questions or debate, we can take a voice vote on this item. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The measure is adopted. Okay, that concludes the business on the daily file. Ms. Hayashi has some guests to announce. Ms. Hayashi.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. We have very special guests today with us from the California Association of African American School Administrators. As you know, they have been in town all week participating in a very important advocacy conference. I'm pleased to introduce William McGee, a board member from the Hayward Unified School District, our new superintendent of Hayward Unified School District, Dr. Donald Evans, is also with us. Not from my district, but from beautiful Santa Monica schools. We also have Assistant Principal Marvin Lawton with us. And finally, from Riverside County, representing the Paris Union School District, Dr. Keisha Holmes. Please give him a well welcome to Assembly.
Okay, so the following members were approved for adjourn in memories today. Ms. Gaines, Dr. Pan, Mr. Williams, Ms. Brownlee, Mr. Williams, Ms. Brownlee, and myself. Who's ready? Mr. Williams?
Members, I rise to adjourn in the memory of Dorothy Marin, a former Oxnard City Councilwoman and environmental leader who passed away last Friday at the age of 82. Dorothy moved to Oxnard from her native New York in 1960 and immediately became involved in our community. Over the years, she established the Oxnard Beautiful Committee, and she helped stop a proposed liquefied natural gas plant from being built on the Oxnard coast, served on the city council for 12 years, beginning in 1980. She was versatile and relentless in her pursuit of basic humanity and environmental justice, whether she was working to keep open a homeless camp or hosting political luminaries such as our former Governor Pat Brown in her home. Dorothy Marin will be missed by the people of Ventura County and by me. Thank you, members.
Ms. Gaines.
Thank you. Members, I rise to request that we adjourn.
I'm sorry. Mr. Calderon.
We could have some order on the floor.
And I'm sorry, Ms. Brownlee, you would like to speak on Mr. Williams' adjourning memory. You are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, too, I want to recognize the legacy and memory of former Oxnard Councilwoman, the environmental visionary and civil rights advocate, Dorothy Moran. She was a native of New York City. Dorothy brought her East Coast bravado to the Oxnard Planning Commission and later to the Oxnard City Council. She fought zealously to protect her local beaches and environment and was committed to recycling long before its benefits were recognized by this state and the nation. Fundamentally, Dorothy, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Fundamentally, Dorothy loved people. She placed principles above popularity and stood up for causes she believed in. She was a woman of virtue, a distinguished politician, and an exceptional person. We all have something to learn from Dorothy. She will be remembered for generations to come from the people of Ventura and the people of California, and I respectfully request to adjourn in memory of her passing.
Thank you, Ms. Brownlee. Ms. Gaines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I rise to request that we adjourn today in the memory of Starine Reese. Born in 1951, Starine Louise Cheek grew up in Huntington Beach and earned a clinical psychology degree from the California State University, Fullerton. Starine is remembered for her devotion to her community through her 17 years of work at United Way. Starine was in charge of distribution of grants to nonprofit groups as Vice President of Community Impact for United Way California Capital Region. She oversaw relationships with 140 local agencies that partner with the United Way in Amador, El Dorado, Placer, Sacramento, and Yolo counties. She is survived by her daughters and 2 siblings. This is a great loss for all of the organizations that do so much to benefit our communities. Thank you.
Mr. Pan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. I also stand in memory of Starine Reese. I served on the United Way board, actually, and she was that was mentioned by Member Gaines, that she was the main staff for our impact model. And I think that some of the official biography certainly talks about her relationships with many different organizations, but she was truly a leader in the community. She was someone who brought people together to try to solve mutual goals. She was someone who, actually, I think one example that probably best exemplifies what she was able to do is that as we brought different agencies together, as a funding agency, I think many of you who have worked with nonprofits know how every nonprofit sort of jostling for their share of the funds. Well, she was able to actually bring agencies together around the common goal, and to the point where the agency would say, you know what, that my other partner, the other person can use the money better than I can, and you should give it to that other person. So if you have someone who can actually get people to come together and share, and not only just share, but actually try to work together to figure out who can do the best job to take care of and improve the community. She led a region-wide effort to be sure that we could prioritize what our top priorities are, meeting with people from across the community, bring people together from many different places. So she certainly was a unique treasure and asset to our region, and someone who would be sorely missed for her dedication and hard work to try to move our Sacramento region forward. So I too ask that we adjourn her memory. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ma.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is with great sadness that I rise to adjourn in memory of Uchichi Amechi, a powerful, motivated young woman who lost her battle with liver cancer on January 29th, 2012, on her 19th birthday. She passed away at home surrounded by her loving family. Uchichi was a beautiful young woman and a powerful youth leader. She graduated from Visitation Valley Middle School and Lowell High School and was set to attend UC Berkeley in the fall of 2011. She had a genuine passion to actively make change and motivate others. She participated in various communities, such as Lowell's extracurriculars and the YMCA's Youth in Government mock legislature. In Youth in Government, her peers elected her as co-president to her local delegation. After being diagnosed in 2009, she began sharing the impact of her disease with the thousands of students she spoke before at Youth in Government as a means to raise awareness and motivate her peers to actively live their lives. No one could forget her genuine words after experiencing the power of her voice. Every once in a while, you meet someone like Uchichi, who has an exceptional spirit, a passion for life, and the gift to lead others. She was an inspiration in her short life to many and will continue to be an inspiration. Her spirit will live on within the hearts of all that she touched and through the communities that she impacted. I ask that we adjourn in her memory.
Thank you. Please bring those names to the desk to be printed in the journal. I am ready to entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Calderon moves, Ms. Conway seconds, that this House stand adjourned until Monday, February 27th at 12 noon. Quorum call is lifted. Oh. Okay, so I'm going to order the desk to remain open for bill introductions. Obviously, Friday, February 24th is the last day to introduce bills. So I'm going to order the assembly desk to remain open tomorrow until 5 p.m. or upon receipt of the last bill from Legislative Council. Thank you. Quorum call is lifted.